All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for hopping on today. We are going to get started with our presentation. We are live on Facebook and we are on Zoom today. So we're going to be going over the Narcan training with Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves. My name is Malaya Florendo, and I'm the trainer with RX Safe Del Norte, and I want to welcome the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition for joining us today so they can share their Narcan training. I'll pass it over to you, Maikia, to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maikia Washington. I'm a community outreach specialist with the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition. Thank you for having us today. Daniel?
Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Norton Luna, and I am an AmeriCorps Vista serving with the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition. Really happy to be here, and I'll pass it to Ariane.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ariane Jones, and I'm the new AmeriCorps Vista serving with the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition. Welcome.
And Lori?
Ayakwi Nicknow, Lori Nesbitt. I'm the Yurok Opioid Program Manager, and I am excited to be welcomed here to the RX Safe Coalition featured today.
Wonderful. Thank you all, and we really appreciate having you today. Again, for those jumping on, we are going to be going over the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition's Narcan training today. We do want to remind everyone there is always an evaluation at the end, and the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition has their own evaluation, which we will leave in the chat on Facebook and in the Zoom, and it will be included at the end of the presentation. For those joining us today, if you are watching from Facebook Live, we do want to remind you that there is about a 45-second delay, so if you have any questions, it may take us a minute to get to them, but you are totally welcome to leave them in the chat, and we'll get to them as soon as possible. For those joining us on Zoom today, please remember to keep your mics muted and your video off for the presentation today. And if you have any questions, you are welcome to leave them in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as possible. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. And yeah, we're excited to get into this Narcan training. First, before we get started, we do, as always, want to go over group agreements. We want to remind everyone that respect and kindness are key. If you're not being respectful and it becomes a persistent issue, you will be removed. Please show tolerance and sensitivity for differences. Participants in the group come from different cultural, racial, gender, and sexually oriented backgrounds, so please be aware and sensitive to judgmental comments, and please try and use positive language. This is a safe space and it is free of judgment, and it's all right to disagree with someone else's point of view. However, we just don't put each other down for it. And this is a space where participants should feel comfortable to be themselves, share their thoughts and ideas without any worry of punishment or judgment. If you are sharing stories today, whether it be live or in the chat, please remember to try and keep others' personal information out of the story, such as using specific names. So you can use "I know someone who" to help protect their identity. Again, using names aids in the spread of rumors and detracts from the point of the information trying to be communicated. So we appreciate if you do share stories, please try and leave others' names out. And again, as always, if you have a question or you need clarification and you don't understand something being talked about in the presentation today, don't be afraid to ask. Remember to ask questions. That goes for all our panelists here today too, or our presenters. If you have any questions, feel free to ask and we'll try and get to your questions as soon as possible. So thank you everyone for respecting the group agreements, and we appreciate having you all here today. Some of the things we may bring up today could bring up some feelings or concerns, and they can bring up some very emotional and heavy topics. So If you need to talk, please reach out. There are hotlines you can call, such as the mental health hotline for Del Norte and the 24-hour crisis services available. So please reach out if you need to. We understand sometimes these presentations can bring up heavy or emotional feelings for some. We do want to give an informed consent and privacy, that each person's participation in this presentation is voluntary, and please respect the privacy of others and do not share personal information with anyone else. This training is being recorded and is live on social media. So if you are participating via Zoom, please turn your video camera off and stay muted for those not presenting. And we definitely want to acknowledge that we are meeting virtually across the lands of many Indigenous peoples, such as the Tolowa Dine, the Yurok, the Karuk, Hupa, Wiyot, and many rancherias such as Elk Valley, Resagini, Big Lagoon, Trinidad, Blue Lake, Table Bluff, and Bronerville. The Indigenous peoples who lived together and cared for this land and each other since time immemorial. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have been the stewards of this land for generations. We know the effects of colonization have impacted Indigenous people disproportionately, and we hope that through this series we can learn together to help heal and work towards a healthy future. And again, we will have the survey links in the chat. The Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition has their own survey and we have our own survey. We do want to make sure that everyone joining today fills out both. Again, you won't receive your Narcan or certification from the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition unless you fill out their survey. And you will not get a raffle entry if you don't fill out RX Safe Del Norte survey. So you make sure you want to fill out both today. Again, I just want to say thank you to our presenters for being here today, and thank you everyone for joining us. And I will hand the mic over to y'all.
All right, thank you, Malaya. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so that we can get onto the presentation. And y'all see that okay? Do we see a presentation? Yes, okay, good. Great, cool. So again, thank you for allowing the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition to deliver this opioid safety net tender training. Today, we'll all present it, Lori, Maikia, myself, and Ariane. Maikia and I will lead a lot of the information distribution, and Ariane is going to actually field the questions that anyone might have throughout this presentation to us at the end. So we just ask that if at any point in time you have any questions that kind of rise up from the information that we're discussing today, that you either put it in the Zoom chat or on Facebook. And as we learn about those, Ariane will actually field those questions to us at the end. So we'll have a little bit of time to kind of address some of those. But yeah. Maikia, do you have any other words to share before we get into this?
Again, hello everyone. I just wanted to share that I just want to reiterate what Malaya touched on earlier. So anyone who attends this opioid safety net tender training, also known as the Narcan training, is eligible to receive a $50 stipend. In order to receive your stipend, your Naloxone opioid overdose kit, and your certificate, you must register for the Wellness and Recovery Series through Eventbrite. You have to complete the Narcan form that we have attached in the chat. And then we also have an evaluation form through RX Safe Del Norte that you have to complete as well. So to be eligible to receive all of your Narcan and your stipend and your certificate, please complete those things today. And we will constantly share that information in the chat box for you all. And we'll jump into the presentation.
All right, awesome. Is it going? Here we are. Okay, so our objectives for today, first, we'd like to talk more about opioids and kind of get onto a base level of knowledge of opioid awareness. And so kind of with that, we want to talk a little bit about opioids, what opioid use disorder is, and then also what an opioid overdose is. In addition, we'll kind of draw in opioids' effect in this particular area on the north coast of California. Then furthermore, we will talk about how to administer naloxone, an opioid antidote, really in the context of an overdose. You know, how to reverse an overdose to bring someone back and save their life. And then finally, we'll identify different harm reduction resources and treatment services in our communities. Okay, so Mikey, do you want to take it away with what is an opioid?
Sure. So before we talk about what an opioid is, we actually want to provide some more context behind the name of the Net Tenders training. So this idea of uplifting our net tenders and really extending the responsibility of net tenders stems from the culture of the Yurok tribe. So essentially in the Yurok tribe, net tenders are valued in the community because they help bring salmon to the community. And this salmon nourishes families and just the community in whole. So that's where we sort of got the name net tenders from. So now we need to really uplift and support net tenders so that we can help build and support this community so that no one dies from an opioid overdose. So the net tenders have another responsibility now, which is helping protect the community. So that's what we're here for today, to talk about how we can build more net tenders in the community to support and protect the community. So with that being said, what is an opioid? Opioid is derived from opium, which stems from the poppy plant. Opioids are powerful drugs that are used to manage pain and sleep, but they have highly addictive qualities and can potentially lead to fatal opioid overdose. So some examples of opioids are morphine, codeine, heroin. Heroin is a big one that we see in the community here, methadone, hydrocodone, and oxycodone.
Another big one that we see cropping up in a lot of different circles is fentanyl. And that is a particularly dangerous opioid in many communities across the United States and across the world, really, because it is such a strong opioid that only a very small dose can actually send someone into an overdose. And it just creates a much higher risk for any opioid users in the community because it can be quite fatal. All right. And so why do people get addicted to opioids? So we have two pictures here that kind of show a little bit of why, in fact, opioids are really addictive. And so opioids actually work in our brain to communicate to the brain about, pain. And so we naturally already create kind of like endorphins, which are a natural opioid that our body produces to, help us out whenever our bodies get stressed. So for example, after a lot of exercise, our bodies do produce endorphins to kind of help that recovery process, and so we don't feel so sore. And so, on this picture on the left-hand side, we kind of see this normal brain. The opioid receptors are already kind of like being used by these endorphins, and we feel really good after we exercise or do any other activity that produces endorphins, and we get dopamine. And so kind of another thing that not a lot of people know about, but like when we eat spicy food too, we get endorphins, and that makes us feel good too. And I mean, some people, they don't really like spicy, But for those who do like spicy, like myself, like I really like spicy food, and it makes me feel good afterwards. And part of that has to do with this relationship going on. So for the most part, it's kind of a natural process that's happening within our own bodies. Now, when we take opioids, what we're doing is we're flooding our brain with more of these chemicals, so that our opioid receptors kind of become more and more filled. Our endorphins are still there, but notice there are much less endorphins than kind of the normal brain, if you will. And this is because when our body realizes and when our brain realizes that we have a lot of these kind of opioids inside, and our receptors are getting excessive stimulation, it stops producing as many endorphins in order to kind of create that balance. Now, our body's creating that balance, but what in the end is happening? We're becoming dependent on the chemicals that we're putting into our body. Because once we stop putting in all those chemicals, now we're only stuck with the few amount of endorphins that we're creating kind of naturally. We can bounce back from it, but it takes a longer time, and people typically feel very sick and very ill during the period while their body is bouncing back and restoring the balance. Mikey or Lori, do you have anything to add to that? All right, we'll move on.
Sorry, I was kind of slow. So one of the common things that people aren't aware of what opioids are is we're prescribed pain medication. So after a surgery or an injury or an accident, that's when these prescriptions are administered. So we walk out of the office with pain medication. And just the link of what an opioid is a pain medication. Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right. Moving on to an opioid overdose. Mikey, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So an opioid overdose basically occurs when a toxic amount of drugs in combination with the drugs overwhelm your body. So like Daniel showed the picture earlier of the opioids actually attaching to the receptors. So an overdose occurs when the opioids actually overcrowd those sectors, and it overwhelms you so much that it just stops the breathing. So the brain that regulates breathing, it actually causes respiratory depression, and it can lead to death. So some symptoms of opioid overdose is if someone is not responding, if they're not moving, or if they can't be woken up, if they have blue lips or nails, again, slowed or not breathing. A breath occurs every 5 seconds. That's a normal breath. Cold or clammy hands, tiny pinpoint pupils, or just making gurgling sounds or choking sounds or snoring sounds. So those are some common symptoms to look for and to identify an opioid overdose. And again, it occurs when there's an overwhelming amount of opioids in your system and it just crowds that respiratory depression. Daniel, would you like to add anything?
No, you hit the nail on the head there. Something that I've typically heard, though, is just those tiny pupils are a really good indicator when someone's not responding that something's wrong and it's probably an opioid overdose. And it's different than, say, something like an alcohol overdose or a meth overdose. But in an alcohol overdose, or when people are kind of really drunk, when their eye pupils are looked at, typically they're really wide. So that's kind of a different thing. All right, so moving on. So this slide's kind of talking about, what causes an opioid overdose. And a lot of times it's because opioid users get an unfamiliar supply. You know, there's a change in the medication that they're taking or the drugs that they're getting on the street, really. And so a lot of times, you know, if their dealer kind of runs out of a particular substance that they're normally getting, they might cut it with something else, or they might go to a new dealer to try to get something. Or even, you know, if an opioid user just gets out of treatment or gets out of jail where they have not been using as often, and they, you know, go back to the same folks that they were getting their drugs from, they might not know that there has been a change in the formula of the drugs that they've been getting. And so heroin might be cut with fentanyl, in which case they would quickly go into an overdose if they were using the same amount that they were used to using, not only because the drug has gotten stronger, but also their tolerance has gone down without using as often. There's also a common misconception as well, as far as, you know, like, well, if I've been using for a while, you know, then my tolerance is higher, yes, but if I'm also using with someone who is bigger than me or has, or, you know, is a woman, then their tolerance might be different. And so just because, you know, if we had the same amount of a particular amount of opioid or heroin or fentanyl, I might be okay, but someone else might not actually be okay. So there's a lot of differences just in our bodies. And so it really is kind of a very risky behavior for folks, especially when they don't know where the drugs are coming from.
So I just want to emphasize the second bullet point. We're actually seeing an increase in overdose related deaths in women because their partners have actually been injecting them with the same amount that they would inject themselves with. And like Daniel touched on earlier, there's a difference in body weight and body mass and what one body can handle and what another body can't handle. So men have been injecting women with the same amount of, let's say, heroin they would inject themselves with. And then it has sort of led to more opioid overdose deaths among women. So that's a common theme that we're seeing is partners they often use together, or when people are using with their friends, they're injecting the same amount because they think they can handle it, when really that's not the case. Or even with prescription pills, you have the elder population who are often taking more than what they need, basing it off of the level of pain that they're actually experiencing in their bodies. So we just want people to be mindful of unfamiliar supply or changes in quality, especially right through now as fentanyl is making its way into local communities. Fentanyl is you only need a very small dose of fentanyl to actually knock someone out. So that's something that we want to keep in mind too. We just want everyone to be safe and to be mindful of those unfamiliar supplies and changes in qualities.
All right. Another, you know, thing that is very important to kind of bring up as far as why people end up turning to opioids to kind of address their pain that they're feeling is there's many types of different pain that people experience in this area and, you know, really throughout the world. And one thing that's particularly important for us to address is that historical trauma is also a pain that people have been addressing with opioids, and it's not necessarily the best way to actually kind of go about this pain that they're feeling. However, it is typically an effective way to kind of run away from that pain that they're feeling and to kind of get those rewards from the dopamine system. escape that. And so it's a struggle really to address the historical trauma, but it is important that we find ways in our community to address, substance use and substance abuse in order to do it in a good way. We have to bring in conversations that address historical traumas that our communities have been experiencing in a good way, so that we can move forward in a way that we can all heal from the pain that we feel.
Exactly. We cannot have a conversation about addressing substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or opioids or methamphetamine, unless we have an honest conversation about historical trauma. And historical trauma is defined as the cumulative, multi-generational collective experience of emotional and psychological injury in communities and descendants of specifically communities of color in Native communities specifically. So we cannot have a conversation about addressing opioids or about healing unless we start talking about historical trauma and how we handle emotional, physical, and psychological pain.
So, Micaiah, do you want to take on this slide with the stories? Just kind of touch on a couple pieces.
So typically here we share 3 stories of addiction and overdose, and we won't spend too much time talking on this today because these are your communities. You know how opioid overdose impacts communities, how suicide impacts communities, especially within different populations, in the elder population, even amongst the youth, and in the Native population as well. So we won't spend too much time touching on this. Lori, would you like to add anything?
No, not at this time.
Right. So more kind of just about the effect of opioids over the past 2 decades, really, and specifically in this area. We like to bring up this next series of slides just to kind of paint the picture of what we're addressing here, the opioid epidemic here locally. So first off, I'd like to draw your attention to the picture of California on the left. And just to kind of notice Humboldt and Del Norte County, you can see that Humboldt is actually still one of the highest opioid using counties and opioid overdose counties in the state 2 decades ago. However, our numbers were only around 14 to 15 per 100,000 residents. We don't have 100,000 residents, but what that was showing was, if we did, that would be around the rate of our deaths. And it's still a lot higher than, other areas in California. Furthermore, when we move over to the right-hand side, just 16 years into the future, we actually see a wide kind of increase to the darkest level that they have on this chart, which to some extent is still kind of like lacking in information because we don't know exactly how high that is, but it's at least double whatever that rate has been, and that just kind of shows you how far this issue has progressed, and now this is what we're doing to address that issue because we want to bring our numbers down. We can see the whole of California really has kind of changed its tones and its colors across this time period. But Humboldt is really just kind of sticking out as a sore thumb, and Del Norte has definitely been affected by it as well. All right. Do you want to speak on this one, Mikia or Lori?
Yes.
Cool.
So can you go back to the little one?
Yeah. I don't know.
So with your mentioning that darker color in Humboldt, I want to address why it's so devastating is most of our tribal members, especially our youth, are in the eastern part of that section of Humboldt. And how this was brought to the attention of our tribe is we had uh, 7 overdoses in the Witch Peck in the eastern part of Humboldt, and our numbers aren't even 100,000. Our total number of our tribe is 6,400. So the loss of one is a loss of a generation for us. So that's kind of an exaggerated statement, but how we have to stay alive, and the only way we can allow people to continue our tribal descendancy is relying on those people to avoid using opioids. And we have a trust factor, and we're trusting our doctors and our attorneys and people that have authority to take care of us. And this is why the trust is broken of our health, especially, that we have to stay alive. So introducing opioids in for pain management is just something that we need to pay attention to. Thank you.
All right, so this next slide is kind of showing the opioid crisis over and across the United States. And something that we kind of draw out here is that when you follow a lot of the territories of the United States that have kind of been really impacted by the opioid epidemic and the overdose rates in these areas that are really high, a lot of times you find that those are the same areas where there's a lot of native populations. And this is definitely true when we look at kind of like the Southwest, in New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada even. And then over here where we're seeing the folks in coal country who have been losing their jobs and have been turning to a lot of opioid pain medications to address pains in their bodies, but also have been kind of like losing control of that. Over here too as well in Oklahoma and in the South. Okay. So, go ahead, Lori.
So that map there is, of course, 4 years old, and we can't seem to keep up with our pictures here, but it's a lot redder across the United States. And I just want to say that, we may talk about Native people, but we as people have a renewal for all people. And what the red is mostly poverty-stricken places where capitalism is kind of taking over, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and of course jobs and housing and poverty and less food supply is part of all this picture going on. And we know that a fast dollar is something that people fall back on to turn a trick to make money, and which is really devastating to the family. And not necessarily you sell or you're a user. That's kind of a fallacy too. But I just think that a true picture is where it is red, dark red. It's even more devastating if you could see the most current picture. Thank you.
All right. Ikea, do you want to talk on this one?
Sure. So just to touch on the image that we just saw, I also want to note that in the midst of COVID-19 crisis, oh, can you go back, please? In the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, these numbers are actually increasing at alarming rates. So here with this slide, we just want to talk about how how so many opioid pills were prescribed in the community. So in Klamath and Witchpeck and Hoopa area, in the specific zip codes below of 95548 and 95546, we can see the opioid prescription rates are extremely high. So in January 2018, in the Klamath, Witchpeck, and Hoopa area, 51,841 opioid pills were prescribed for residents of 4,867. So that's 10.6 opioid pills per resident per month. 10.6 pills per resident per month. That is a ridiculous number. And we need to note that these pills were being prescribed by our health providers. It's not always a matter of street drugs such as heroin use. We're talking about opioid prescription pill medications here. And anyone can develop an abuse issue if they have access to 10.6 pills per month.
Yeah. Just to kind of touch on that piece as well, when you have overprescribed amounts of opioids, or when opioids are overprescribed in a particular area, what that area is really facing is a risk of unused opioids then being sold and then brought to the street as well. So that's kind of a big issue to sort of just kind of be aware of when we are facing this, this really stark and alarming rate of prescription. All right. And so here we have 2017 opioid overdose death rates. So 2017 was a particularly bad year for our overdose death rates in Humboldt and Del Norte County. And it has to be mentioned that the folks that sort of bore or bear the brunt of the overdose death rate is the Native American communities in these two counties. And it really does go to say, just kind of like Lori was mentioning before, I mean, every life matters. And as a kind of world renewal people, this is it's alarming when anyone is dying from an opioid overdose, but it's particularly damaging to lose lives of the Native community because their populations are so small already. And so each loss of life is actually very, very impactful. It's like losing a generation. Okay, so now we've got a lot of the doom and gloom kind of behind us. We want to go into how to actually start changing the tides around the opioid epidemic in this area. And the first step is really knowing how to respond in an emergency situation when someone is going through an opioid overdose. How do we reverse that overdose? How do we actually save that life? And we have a little video that we'd like to show, but actually I think I'm going to hand it to our trainer, Malaya Florindo, to actually play a video. So I'm going to stop share so that she can actually share this video.
Here we go.
Narcan nasal spray is an emergency treatment for a known or suspected opioid overdose. The appropriate use of Narcan nasal spray can help you save a life. Narcan nasal spray is not a substitute for emergency medical care. As with any drug, you need to be aware of important safety information concerning its use. If you encounter someone who is unresponsive and you suspect an overdose, first shake their shoulders and shout their name. Kevin. Ask if he or she is okay. Hey, can you hear me? Check for signs of an overdose, unresponsive to touch or voice. Breathing is slow, uneven, or has stopped. Snoring, gasping, or gurgling sounds. Fingernails or lips are blue or purple. Administer Narcan nasal spray as quickly as possible if someone is unresponsive and an opioid overdose is suspected, even when in doubt, because prolonged respiratory depression may result in damage to the central nervous system or even death. Lay the person on their back to receive a dose of Narcan nasal spray. Remove Narcan nasal spray from the box. Peel back the tab with the circle to open it. Remove and review the printed quick start guide inside the package. Hold the Narcan nasal spray with your thumb on the bottom of the plunger and your first and middle fingers on either side of the nozzle. Do not press the plunger to test or prime the device. If you do, you will waste all or part of the dose of medication. Tilt the person's head back and provide support under the neck with your hand. Gently insert the tip of the nozzle into one nostril until your fingers on either side of the nozzle are against the person's nose. Press the plunger firmly to give the full dose of Narcan nasal spray. Remove the device from the nostril after giving the dose. After you have given this medication, seek emergency help right away. Narcan nasal spray is not a substitute for emergency medical care.
I'm with somebody who stopped breathing. I think they've had an overdose.
Move the person on their side after giving Narcan nasal spray. If possible, put their hands under their head and bend their upper leg forward. This helps prevent the person from rolling onto their stomach. This is known as the recovery position. Continue to watch the person closely. If they do not wake up or respond to your voice or touch, or if they do not seem to be breathing normally within 2 to 3 minutes, use a new Narcan nasal spray to give an additional dose in the other nostril.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Let's go back to the slideshow, okay. Cool. Oh no! All right, there we are. Great, well, so actually, before we get into the types of resources, Micaiah, do you have anything you want to add, or Lori, do you have anything you want to add to the video that we just watched?
I think it kind of takes the fear out of actually doing the action. It gives you a familiarity of what you have to do, and then of course once you've practiced it a bit, or at least put the Narcan in your hand and figure out what it looks like, it all comes together. And I think this is a good video as an introduction.
So I think this is a great video as well, but there are some realistic things to keep in mind here. So although there are no side effects associated with Narcan or Naloxone nasal spray, I will say that after you administer the Naloxone and this individual wakes up, again, that's hopefully they wake up immediately. But what you have done is basically kicked all of the opioids out of their system. So that image that we showed you all earlier with the pain receptors, you've knocked all of those opioid receptors out. So what's happening is this person is going to immediately go into withdrawal here, withdrawal symptoms. So this person may be experiencing a tremendous amount of pain. They may not know what's going on around them, what's happening, and then they find you on top of them, you know, inserting Narcan, that we never know how they're going to react in that situation. So the best thing to do is to, after you administer Narcan, step aside and really give that person some time, or give yourself time for some help to come. So before you even go in to administer Narcan, what you need to do is call for help immediately. And you don't have to explain that there was an opioid overdose. You don't have to mention that there are any drugs. You just say that this person is not breathing, this person is not responding. And that will immediately trigger supportive services. And Daniel, you can touch on that some more if you like.
Yeah, thanks, Micaiah. So what Micaiah was just kind of talking about is a lot of times people are sort of afraid of bringing up the fact that, there are opioids on the scene, or calling 911 because they're afraid that the police are going to show up, and they don't want to deal with that. And, in our communities, and considering the historical trauma that has gone on in the past, that's understandable. And so something we just try to tell people is it's still important to call medical professionals, because there are events, and I've definitely heard horror stories where, someone has been revived with Narcan before, and they, everyone thought it was going to be okay. So they just went to bed because it was happening late at night. And that person ended up slipping back into an overdose and dying. And that all had to do with not calling 911 and opting, to just kind of handle it on their own. And it really is not a thing for that, because Narcan only lasts for 30 to 90 minutes in someone's body. And so that's why we really suggest calling 911, because the Narcan is buying time for the emergency personnel to show up and revive that person. And that's really what it is doing. In addition, those emergency personnel should have more Narcan on them to administer that if you were to run out, and the person were still not to respond. Sometimes it takes up to, 4 doses or 6 doses. I've heard of another time where it took up to 14 doses to actually revive someone, and they did revive someone with 14 doses of Narcan, and that was a fentanyl case in particular. But we understand that a lot of people don't like the police to show up, and so what we say is, when we call 911, if we just tell them that there has been a, that the person, that we're with is not responding, that triggers a paramedic response, but it does not trigger a police response from the dispatch. However, when we say something like there's an overdose, typically police will want to show up as well. So just something to keep in mind. If you care, then maybe just say the person is not responding and they're not breathing. Lori, you have something to add too?
Yeah, Daniel, can you answer me a question? Just because the conversation is, can we tell the importance of why we face the person away from us when we put them in that position?
Yeah, so we do turn people away from us when we're putting them into the recovery position. Typically, because of what Micah was talking about as well, their brain is going to be wiped out from all the opioids, and they're going to wake up, and they could wake up very abruptly, and there's no telling on what kind of emotion that they're going to wake up with as well. And if they do wake up swinging, you want to not be in the zone in which you'll get hit, because that's kind of the last thing that you want to happen when you are saving someone's life. But it is something just to be aware of. I also want to kind of direct people to the videos that RX Safe Del Norte has put on YouTube about this topic as well. They have a really great training video that is about 5 minutes, and it's nice because it kind of takes things a little bit slower through the Narcan training. So if you do want to kind of like rewatch something, that's a really great video to watch. And then after that particular video, kind of on the queue, you'll find someone who has reversed over 40 overdoses, and they work for the Humboldt area harm reduction or Hatcher. They work for the Humboldt area community harm reduction group, and they've reversed over 40 overdoses and seen kind of a gamut of responses, and so they're really informed for how all of those different cases.
Also, this position is very important because you want to be mindful of all that this person may be going through and experiencing at that time. When someone is down, they may fall on their face or hurt their head. Sometimes there may be some bleeding, or there may be some vomiting or some gurgling, or choking that's occurring. So you want to handle them in a very gentle and safe manner, and turning them over in that recovery position can help avoid with any choking on vomit or anything of that nature. So that's another thing that we like to emphasize during this training, is to handle the head and the body with gentle touches. So Daniel, it looks like you're muted, but now we're actually going to talk about the types of resources in the community. We're going to go over the prevention and harm reduction resources, treatment resources, and crisis services. So Daniel, can you unmute yourself?
Thanks, Cynthia. So this slide kind of goes over a couple of the icons that you'll find in our community resource card, which we include in each one of our naloxone kits. We include 3 copies of these resource cards so that folks can refer to all the different places that they can really turn to in their community to get assistance with, either getting some harm reduction or overdose prevention tools, or actually referring someone to treatment, and then also just having someone to call immediately in the moment of an emergency. For Del Norte, we've got Open Door Community Health Center. This is their phone number in Crescent City, and they've got a medication disposal bin. They also provide HIV services. This is really important for harm reduction, because if people end up sharing needles, you do want to make sure that you don't have a bloodborne pathogen or any other kind of immune disease. And hopefully you can get some new needles as well, but that's something that we're kind of lacking in our community right now. So they also have connection to recovery services as well as medication-assisted treatment, which helps people kind of get off of the street opioids and onto a doctor-prescribed opioid medication, Suboxone, which has naloxone and the opioid combined with it in order to kind of make sure that those who are on this medication can't take any more opioids to get more high or anything. It just kind of puts them at that stable level from which they can be weaned down, or just kind of find the balance in their life and find the routine so that they can start, focusing on other things rather than just getting more drugs or worrying about their supply of drugs. They can actually start getting a job. They can start, doing things for them or their family to make sure that they can get on the right foot. We also want to highlight RX Safe Del Norte. They have access to Narcan, and they are distributing in the community. So if you do run out of Narcan, there are always some folks that you can call, as well as Health and Human Services. They can also refer folks to different treatment options, as well as some sober living homes. And they do have resources specifically targeted for pregnant women who are experiencing substance use disorder. So they're a great resource to kind of call. And then we have a crisis line over here, which I think was noted earlier in this presentation, actually, by Malaya Florindo. And then, Maikia, do you want to take anything over here or in the next slide in Humboldt?
So we can talk about Humboldt Resources now, and we will quickly move through these because we are cutting it close on time. So Humboldt Resources, there are so many treatment resources and services that you can go to just to receive more information on harm reduction, to obtain naloxone, but then also to seek out treatment. So we have Aegis Treatment Center. They open up on July 15th. So they're actually a new treatment service provider, and they will be open very shortly. Crossroads, Healthy Moms, Humboldt Recovery Center, Waterfront Recovery, and again, Hatcher is a great harm reduction resource. North Coast AIDS Project, and then we have the Open Door community clinics. There are open door clinics or wellness centers in Arcata, Eureka, Ferndale, Fortuna. They also have mobile services, and they also have services available in Willow Creek. And Semper Virens is in Eureka, I believe, and they're open 24/7. So if you need urgent care, they are open and available 24/7.
Yeah, and I will just highlight this other piece on the open door, that all of the places that we kind of highlighted in this presentation right now, these are all the ones, all the open door community health and wellness centers that have particular substance use disorder services. So they are kind of directed towards any folks who do struggle with substance use disorder, whether that's opioids or anything else. These are the clinics that would be go-tos to kind of get you some assistance. Cool. And then we have tribal resources as well. So let's see, Makia, do you want to talk in this one or more? Okay.
Okay, so the Yurok Tribal Court, actually, we work through the Yurok Tribal Court. The Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition partners with the Yurok Tribal Court and Yurok Health and Human Services to bring resources to the community. We also have medication lock boxes. So earlier we talked about the ridiculous amount of prescription pain pills that were prescribed in our areas, in our region. We have medication lock boxes to help protect pain medications, and this is particularly helpful for our elder community. We have harm reduction services, naloxone, and we can also refer individuals to treatment centers, mainly through United Indian Health Services. There's also a 24/7 tribal youth line that is run through the Youth at Risk program that is offered through the Yurok Tribal Court. And then there's United Indian Health Services, and behavioral health warm line and crisis line services as well. Lori, would you like to add anything to this slide?
Yeah, please. So the wellness program, to expand that, as we have the adult wellness and the youth wellness. And in particular, the youth wellness is youths that have entered the legal system, the juvenile hall system, the even delinquency and not going to school. We are stressing that education is number one, and they need to go to school. So if there's problems going to school, it's just a red flag going up that problems are starting. And we've been brought to the attention, just like other people, is that the education to prison pipeline is actually true for this area. And once they enter the system, we have a hard time getting them out. Probation lasts so long after the incidents that they have a hard time getting past that. And also our wellness program addresses when you enter the legal system for a drunken public or a DUI or a drug possession. We're here to assist our tribal people, and tribal court expands that more than social services, meaning that if you have a tribal Yurok enrolled child in the home, we're here to assist. If your partner that has had children in the home, we're here to assist. So some of the is saying that we're assisting the whole family, and we have a lot of grandparents that are guardians of our young tribal enrolled children, so, and foster homes. Those are the people that we still have to stay in touch with. And I just wanted to make sure that is addressed, that it doesn't hurt to call us and see if people are eligible. We're more than happy to talk to whoever will give us a call.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. And I would just like to kind of say, like, as well, for any of these United Indian Health Services programs, if you are curious about any of them, or you do want to know more, the Community Health and Wellness line is just the best place to go to not only find out what resources are near you, but also, you know, to find out other phone numbers to kind of call to make sure that you are up to date with, you know, any of the services that are for pregnant women with SUD, or any of the other treatment resources near you, or how to get more Narcan and stuff like that. So with no further ado, I think we want to say this, but congratulations, we've made it to the end of the training, but we will take questions at this point in time.
So while we work on getting questions, I just wanted to add one more piece, and then we can move on to answering some questions. But there are resources and services available to get help. Reach out to any of these services we have provided, and we will include these resource packets in your opioid overdose reversal kits. Reach out and encourage everyone you know to become a net tender, to take on this additional responsibility of getting certified and trained in administering Narcan, because we are all about saving lives. We have to combat this issue. Get certified, get trained, reach out to RX Safe Del Norte, continue to participate in the Wellness and Recovery Series, and get as much information and resources and services as you can, because pain is real and the risks are real. So we want to prevent opioid overdose deaths. Please get trained. And we can move into some questions now. Thank you.
All right, so I have some questions in the chat. I have one from Philip that says, what alternative to opioids are there to pain management? Do you have any answers?
So I will say that there are a variety of ways to address pain management. I know that our local health clinics, Open Door, is developing some of those, as well as UIHS. And I particularly am more connected to what's going on within UIHS. I know they do have quite a few salves that they're actually selling that help manage pain. But also there are some practices that you know, our doctors know about when we talk about, you know, our own substance choices when we're going through a surgery or something like that. One of my friends, I mean, I'm not a doctor or anything, but one of my friends was telling me that they went to a dentist and told them that they actually, you know, they didn't want any of the medications that they would be giving them to recover from a wisdom tooth being pulled. And that dentist was like, whoa, I don't know what to tell you, man, but let me do some research. And one thing that kind of came out of that was drink coffee and take aspirin, and that kind of like boosts the effects of the aspirin. But again, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not like saying that's what you got to do. But I just know that there are options out there, and that it is worth talking to our medical professionals about to pick their brains, because those are the people that need to be coming up with these kinds of solutions. Mikey, do you have anything to add to that?
I just wanted to add that Lori talks about this, and we also talk about this at the Yurok tribe, but these alternative pain medications are called alternative, but really within the tribal communities, these are not alternatives. These are traditional methods of treating pain. And I know a really great resource is Warm Hearts Healing Hands. Valerie Yurok, she has some really great tips for managing pain in a traditional framework, just simply through yoga, pain management by massaging or using certain teas, herbs, salves. Those are just some tips, and I'm pretty sure we can bring in the experts at a later time to dig deeper into those alternative pain management options that are available. But they're really not alternatives. They are the traditional ways of healing pain in the tribal community.
Thank you guys for those responses. I do want to add also for that question for alternative pain management. We did have a workshop July 7th with Dr. Kurtz and Dr. Lee on the alternatives to opioids in the treatment of acute pain. And we do have that live video. It is still on our Wellness and Recovery Series Facebook page, as well as on our RX Safe Del Norte YouTube page. So if you would like to check that video out, they had some great input for other ways to manage pain.
That's awesome. Thank you. Sorry, I keep linking everyone's slide. I think I'm going to stop the
There's
share.
another question. This question is, let me go back to it. If someone were to have Narcan administered to them and then use it again shortly after, would something happen to them? I would say no. There's no effects to Narcan.
So one of the things is questioning the Narcan is, but not all of us know exactly what drug or possibly why that person's not going to wake up. And Narcan is administered to possibly wake them up, thinking that it's an overdose, and it will not hurt them if it's some other drug. So, and then if they don't wake up, that's why there's 2 nasal sprays in the one box to administer it a second time. And then, like what Micaiah said, is as soon as you see somebody's not waking up and you shake them and you do that chest, their knuckles in their chest, and they're still not waking up, then it's just like if we were doing mouth to mouth, you would say call 911 right then, so you get help as much as you can. And 2 is, I think that one of the things is you have to identify that they're actually breathing before, because if there's no air going in, the Narcan's not going to go in. So identifying that if they're breathing is one of the first things. And in our kit, we have that shield to do mouth to mouth and resuscitation. So one of the things is people are not doing well in especially the heroin world here, and we need to call attention to it, and that's why this Narcan has been administered in these places, especially in the East County and the homeless camps. We're really wanting to sit outside those homeless camps and have them come to us and have the word of mouth spread inside those camps to come get the Narcan. And that's one of our next things that was on our agenda before the pandemic, and we're still wanting to do that. So we just need to join hands and get this done as soon as we can. Thank you.
Yeah, I will just say something just to kind of clear up any confusion. But the thing is, actually, the way that the Narcan nasal spray is designed as that plunger to kind of like force a spray up someone's nose, it does help kind of take care of the breathing aspect. So even if someone is not breathing, it is okay to actually spray that in their nose, like, and it will make it up to the brain. And so it is actually okay to spray that. And I just want to make that clear, that if someone seems to be kind of like their breathing is really depressed because of the opioids that they're taking, definitely still use the Narcan, because it does give someone a chance to live. Yeah. And it seems our link to our survey is not working, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that while we answer any other.
All right, any other questions?
So no, there's no other questions at this time.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I just wanted to add another piece about the Narcan. So although Narcan can only be used to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose, like Lori talked about, there is no harm in administering the Narcan if you don't know what drug was used, or if there was even drug use. There is no harm. And I also wanted to add that Narcan can also be used on pets, on animals. So that's also something to consider if you're ever in a weird situation where you just don't know. And there are so many myths out there about different ways to reverse an opioid overdose death, or just an overdose. And I wanted to say that those actually don't work. The only way to address the issue is to administer Narcan. So you can't inject some unknown fluid into your friend, no salt water solutions, no throwing them in a cold bath. Those things are not safe and they don't work. Please always call for help, reach out to medical professionals, and use the Naloxone. So get trained. Lori, any additional final thoughts that you would like to add to wrap up this training?
I just want to extend my my thank yous out to RxSafe for giving us the opportunity to heal our community. And I know this extends past Del Norte, and we just really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ariane, would you like to add any additional tips?
I also want to say thank you to RxSafe Del Norte. I know many of the medical professionals are working on opioid alternatives to kind of separate from substance abuse disorders. So yes, thank you everyone for attending.
I just want to give people a quick update. The survey is working now. Just so we know, I have been already starting to get responses in. So thank you very much for those of you who are tackling that now. And we appreciate all the feedback. We appreciate your participation, and we appreciate, in the end, your dedication to the community and to those in it who are at risk of an overdose. And thank you very much for taking on this responsibility so that no one else has to die from an opioid overdose. And thank you, Del Norte, for giving us the place to do this.
Thank you. We really appreciate having all of you here today, and for you giving an amazing workshop and training for us today. It's great to get different perspectives of training because you learn something new in every single one. So I really appreciate you all being here today and doing this for us. So thank you again to the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition, Daniel, Maikia, Ariane, Lori. Thank you all for being here today. Is there any last words you want to give everyone, or any events coming up that you want to promote?
I will say this, not next week, but the week after. So on Thursday the 23rd and Thursday the 30th of July, we will be doing some more of these Narcan trainings. So if you meet anyone else who is interested, and you tell them, hey, I signed up for this training and I'm getting $50 and a Narcan kit and a certificate and everything. If you're stoked about it, please tell your friends to register for the Wellness and Recovery series, so that they can be privy to this presentation as well, so that they can also sign up for something like this. We'd like to get as many people as we can to sign up and trained up in how to save a life. Yeah. And Lori's got something.
So I just wanted to extend out the interest and passion about keeping people alive. And we have several coalitions throughout the 2 counties that everyone is welcome to. It's not necessarily, tribal people. It's all communities, all people that are losing their loved ones. And there's several coalitions. And because in particular now that we've gone all online, I want to extend the invitation that we need community people to help us extend the word, help us get these grants to keep coming, because just like any other grant, it runs out, and we need to write more. And if we had more community input, we possibly could have more harm reduction. We possibly could have more syringe exchanges. We possibly could have education to where our young ones aren't growing up and doing these activities and behaviors. We could actually break the cycle. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lori. Well, with that, I just want to say thank you to all of you. Again, we can't thank you enough for sharing your workshop today. We do have a question. What are these coalitions? And they want us to share info, which, yes, we can definitely share info on these coalitions. If you go to the Wellness and Recovery's Facebook page, as well as the RX Safe Del Norte page, I'm sure if you check out the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition page, there's probably some more information on them, as well as other resources in the area. So you can check out all of these Facebook pages or our websites to get some more information on coalitions working with us in the area. I do want to remind everyone also that the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition has their own survey and eval after this training that you need to fill out to be able to receive your certification and Narcan kits and stipends. So please remember, if you did take this training today, to complete this survey. It's very important, not only to you guys, but to them. So please remember to fill that out. And Daniel said the link should be working now. So yeah, make sure to fill that out. And with that, if you want to get some more information or reach out to us, you can contact us on Facebook and through email. You can check out our Facebook page for this specific event, the Wellness and Recovery series, at Facebook, or you can check out our RX Safe Del Norte website at rxsafedelnorte.org, and you can check out the RX Safe Del Norte Facebook. We also usually post some updates, and if you would like to message us and get some more information about some coalitions that we are working with in the surrounding counties, you may reach out to us and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. And remember to check out our presenters at the yuroktribe.org to learn more about the Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition. with that said, we do still have our evaluation form after every presentation. Remember that if you fill out this evaluation form, you will gain entry into our wellness raffle. So make sure that you fill out this evaluation as well, because that's a free entry into the wellness raffle. And we just want to thank you all for being here today for this presentation for the Wellness and Recovery series. And remember to register for the Wellness and Recovery series on our Eventbrite at wellnessandrecoveryseries.eventbrite.com, and check out our Facebook page for more information. Again, I want to say thank you to our presenters today, and we really enjoyed having you. And yes, they will be having more trainings on July 23rd, 10:30 a.m. and July 30th at 10:30 a.m. So make sure to tune back in to join the training. Let your friends know, let your family know, because it's important. Like Lori said, we need to break these cycles and we need to normalize Narcan in our everyday lives. So thank you everyone for being here today.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.